Good afternoon, everybody. Mike Naso here from IPR 365 with the latest on the tropics. It is the first video podcast update of the 2013 Atlantic hurricane season because we have the first significant, or at least somewhat significant, tropical cyclone of the 2013 hurricane season, and that is in the form of Tropical Storm Chantal. Now, we've already had Andrea and Barry, and both of those storms were not overly significant, but they both developed in the deep tropics, and with it only being the 8th of July and already having a system coming from the Cape Verde region in what they call the MDR, the Mean Development Region, it's something to keep an eye on because this is Chantal, and this could be not necessarily a troublemaker itself, but it could be a sign that we're going to have a lot of problems this hurricane season if we do have a lot of development coming out of the tropics. Keep in mind, last hurricane season, the last few, we've had a lot of storms at higher latitudes moving out to sea, weaker. But if it was a month from now and this were coming towards the islands, it could be much more of a threat than it even already is. There you can see Chantal. It's sitting to the east of, say, Barbados and the Lesser Antilles, moving very quickly towards the west-northwest, and you can kind of see this tail here extending from it on the intertropical convergence zone. Already more waves coming behind it. It is still early, but to see this kind of wave activity might be a precursor of things to come. A lot of dry, stable air to the north of it especially, and with the high pressure, it is definitely getting shoved to the west at a very rapid rate of speed. Now let's look at the latest on Chantal as the 2 p.m. advisory, because there are watches mornings out. We'll talk about that in a sec. You can see it was at 11.3 north, 52.8 west. Winds were still 45 miles an hour, some minimal moderate tropical storm gusting to about 60. It is racing west-northwest at 25. Back in 2001, there was another tropical storm, Chantal, that also developed in the same region. That was in August of 2001, but I recall that was also racing, probably even faster than this, and it ended up opening into a wave before the islands. We'll see if Chantal does that. 1,005 millibars. The general thinking is a continued west-northwest track through here, and then by this time tomorrow, having already passed through the islands, by this time Wednesday, bearing down or striking Hispaniola, possibly as a strong tropical storm, not quite a hurricane, it doesn't look like. Especially with the fast motion, it's going to be hard to become a hurricane because it has to vertically stack itself. And then by this time Thursday, exiting into the area between the Turks, Caicos, and the Bahamas, and then making a slowdown by Friday night, and then starting to be a little bit of a question mark where it would go from there. There will be a little weakness that it might be able to take advantage of. However, there are indications from the model guidance, which I'll show you in a minute, that shows ridging may rebuild, which might push whatever's left of Chantal by then back to the west. So right now, it's not looking like this will be a hurricane, and certainly not a strong hurricane. If it were to become one, it would be probably somewhere here Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, very briefly, or it would be down the line if it happened to do something past the weekend, but the chances of that do not seem that great at this point in time. We do have, of course, Tropical Storm Watch for Puerto Rico, watches and warnings for the islands, so we'll be getting those advisories from the guys at the Hurricane Center every 3 hours now, simply because of the fact that we have a tropical cyclone moving towards land, and anytime we have that, you have to keep an eye on it because it doesn't matter how strong it is, it can still cause problems. Now here's the latest model guidance. Now, climatologically speaking, we should be looking at a zooming track through the Caribbean and a gradual bend towards the northwest Caribbean Gulf of Mexico. However, it does look like Chantal is going to take a more northerly track through a lot of the islands here of the Lesser and Greater Antilles, and then a whole bunch of the Bahamas. But do note here, it is starting to show that the ridging, especially if it remains weaker and in the low-level flow, it might kind of spin around out here for a while in the Bahamas. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to strengthen over the Gulf Stream or that it'd have favorable upper-level winds. If anything, it's probably more favorable now wind shear-wise than it'll be later. But that does mean it could bring impacts to land, and including the United States. So we're going to keep an eye on this to see exactly what transpires. But as of right now, it's not looking overly dramatic as far as intensification is concerned, at least not at this point in time. The latest AVN satellite imagery, you can see there's Chantal looking very sick right now. It does not look good. I think dry air is really having an impact. If this was in a much more moist environment, you'd see deeper convection, and also if it slowed down, it would have a chance to vertically stack more. But when you see these clouds here heading north of Barbados, these kind of stable clouds, that's the sinking air. It's just not in the cards to have fast development or really any development, so we wouldn't be overly concerned about it becoming a significant hurricane, or if it keeps this up, not even a significant tropical storm prior to its island landfall. Now here's the GFS model. You can see it takes Chantal back into Florida. Within 180 hours, it takes a track up over Hispaniola through the Bahamas and then kind of loops around and heads back into Florida and the Gulf. That is certainly a possibility, but it doesn't necessarily mean it'd be strong. I would probably say Chantal would have a better chance of becoming a hurricane if it did that, if it was weak and ill-defined and somehow managed its way into the Gulf of Mexico down the line. But that would be so far out and such a situation that doesn't seem very possible right now, and we'd have plenty of time to watch it. And look at this. The GFS model is showing that another wave is going to move off and become our next system, which, by the way, the name would be Dorian. If you remember, in 07 it was Dean, and that of course was a Category 5 hurricane into the Yucatan Peninsula. And if that became a system, we'd probably have a lot more problems with this system, because models have been a little bit persistent with it, showing that down the line, even in the longer range, this could head up towards the Gulf of Mexico. But again, that wave's still over Africa. So we've got plenty of time to watch all this, but it does bear watching because it is hurricane season, and if things stay like they are, it could be a sign of things to come potentially. Here's Eric in the Eastern Pacific as of 11 a.m. It was at 22.2, 110.0 west. Winds 45, same strength, believe it or not, as Chantal, although Eric was a hurricane. Moving northwest at 11, should parallel the Baja, 1001 millibars. It should weaken and head on out towards the west, and we're not going to have to deal with it anymore after that. You can see here's the latest visible as the sun came up. Definitely a circulation with it. There's not really any indication of where it's located, but it did not strike the Baja, came close, and was very, very weak and ill-defined. Again, look at these stable clouds. That's from the cooler waters of the Pacific. You can see it there, not looking all that great. Some showers for the Baja. And I did want to touch on another system we have out there in the western Pacific. We have Tropical Storm Sulik, and if I said that right, is at 19.1 north, 142.6 east. Winds were 65, and it was moving west at 11. Forecast to become a Cat 2 typhoon and head towards China, north of Taiwan, by the weekend. However, even though it's only a tropical storm at this point in time, I thought it was prudent to mention in the update that if you look at this satellite imagery, this is clearly intensifying. It looks more like the symmetry of a major hurricane than a tropical storm. In fact, if Chantal looked like that, we'd have a lot to worry about. So definitely a problem there in the western Pacific. Look at those cold cloud tops. Very, very impressive tropical cyclone. But that's it right now on Chantal and Eric and our tropical storm in the western Pacific. I'm Mike Naso from IPR. I will see you next time, and we'll see what hurricane season 2013 has in store.